So these are 3 things that I wish I knew before having an unmedicated birth. The first thing that I wish I knew before striving for an unmedicated birth is that the more I would tense, the harder my contractions became. And I think I realized this so late, but actually in the way that we prepare our bodies for birth, we forget that actually our bodies have already done the hard part. We're just along for the ride. And if we can remind our bodies that we need to melt into the sensation, we need to really lean into the power of those surges and let that wave take over our body, then it's a much more comfortable experience for you, full stop. With my first birth, I remember so clearly holding tension in my face, my forehead and my jaw, holding my fists so tight, pulling my little shoulders up towards my ears. And I think that if somebody had reminded me in that moment to just soften your face, soften your jaw, soften your pelvic floor, melt your shoulders away from your ears, just let that wave take over, immediately my labor would have progressed more smoothly, my surges would have become more manageable. And this is only something that I learned in my second birth. I made my mantra, surrender, 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 and reminded my partner, tell me, like, if you see me doing these things, holding my fists tight, clenching my jaw, frowning my forehead, remind me to melt and to surrender. Those were my 2 words that I had up on my little affirmations in my sort of birth altar in my birth space. And that was what I asked my care team in the room to remind me of. And the minute that I did those things, everything became so much more manageable. So my tip number 1 would be allow yourself to melt into your labor. Surrender to those sensations. Relax your body as much as you can. Go loose and limp between your contractions. And immediately, everything becomes much more comfortable for you, but also you're removing yourself from that fear, tension, pain cycle. When we hold tension in our bodies, we're telling our bodies that this is a difficult experience, that this is something that should feel fearful or painful for us. And we're also, by utilizing that energy elsewhere, restricting blood flow to our uterus, to our placenta, to our baby, who should be getting all of that beautiful nourishment and staying really well oxygenated. So let's move away from the fear, tension, pain cycle and remember those words: melt, surrender, let that wave take over, relax as much as you can. Tip number 2, or sort of part of tip number 1, is ways that you can come out of the fear, tension, pain cycle really easily. And for me, that was with my breath. Your breath is a free and easy way that you can carry with you no matter what kind of route or path your birth takes, that can help you to remind your body that you're okay. You are okay. And it removes you immediately from a space of tension, of fear, because you're tricking your brain into saying, actually, we can come out of that cycle. There isn't a lion chasing us. This is just a new face, or, the new smells, the new hospital environment. And so by reminding our body, by slowing down the exhale, by thinking in for 4, out for more, we are telling our body in the easiest way possible that actually we can just continue to comfortably birth our baby. That we are not in danger, we are not in distress, that this is a safe place for us to continue to birth our babies physiologically, comfortably, without intervention, disruption, and that all is well. My next huge tip is that labor can be long. Labor can be a lengthy process, and to avoid chasing labor. With my first birth, I walked and walked and walked. I did all of the things because I wanted labor to begin now. And then once it started, I wanted to keep it going. And actually, the more births that I have attended as a birth worker, the more labors I've had myself, the more I realize that actually what we should be focusing on instead is resting for as long as we can. Resting until you can no longer. Labor will come for you. And so as soon as labor begins, making sure that you are eating enough, you're fueling yourself enough, and then get back into bed or rest on the sofa. Resting our bodies gives us fuel and energy and reserves for when we really need it later on, because there will be a point in our labor where our bodies will tell us you need to get up, you need to get moving to make this more manageable for you. So staying in bed as long as possible, resting as well between those contractions is hugely beneficial. So much work happens and our baby makes so much progress when our uterus is relaxed. So everything will contract to help encourage baby down. And then when we relax all of those tissues, baby's actually able to make that progress. So for us, we're talking about finding positions in our labor where we can comfortably melt right down into a beanbag, head down into a pillow, into the sofa, into our partner's arms. Being able to relax all of our muscles fully means that our labor can progress smoothly, easily, in a timely fashion without us poking or prodding or having any intervention. So rest deeply until you can no longer, and then making sure that you are resting or getting into restful postures or poses between those contractions is so, so important. So when we talk about rest during labor and just how powerful it is, one of the things that I have noticed with the more women that I support is that those mamas who end up looking for more medication, looking for an epidural at the ends of their labors is mostly driven by exhaustion. So if we can stack the odds in our favor to avoid exhaustion by resting in early labor, by resting between our contractions, we are more likely to be able to avoid an epidural if that's not what we really wanted, because it's less likely to do with exhaustion and more likely to do with the real reasons that we would actually want it, because we are having difficulty managing our labor surges or because we are looking to create some relaxation in the pelvic floor perhaps. Okay, so my last tip then would be just to remind you that it is very difficult to make a truly informed decision regarding how you want the birth of your baby to unfold or various possible interventions that you might be offered during your labor. If your labor is intense, you are not in the right side of your brain in the same way that you are when you are fully with it. Maybe during your pregnancy, you're engaging in antenatal education, you are meeting with doulas and other birth workers, you're having these appointments with your obstetrician and given the benefit of time in between those appointments to do some research. When you are experiencing intense labor contractions, it is not the time for you to be making big decisions. You are more likely to have that fight or flight or fight or freeze or fawn response and make a decision that is out of fear when you make an informed decision during labor than if you were to have a really clear idea of what you are okay with and what you are not okay with your birth planning or your birth preferences pre the birth process beginning. This is why I am such an advocate for birth planning. And the way that I approach birth planning is not you write down your wishes on a piece of paper and you just hope that they all come into fruition. The beauty of birth planning is that it allows you the opportunity to, yes, work as a beautiful communication tool between you and your care providers, but also it acts as a really lovely opportunity for you to delve into what am I really okay with? What does that look like? What's the evidence around that? How is that going to feel for me and my birth and my body and my baby? And the way that I approach creating the birth plan is instead of just having your plan A and hoping that it all goes accordingly, you create your plan A, B, C, and D. So you create your plan for if you were to go into spontaneous labour and have a physiological birth. You create a plan that if we need to actually transfer into hospital and perhaps you're faced with other interventions like an oxytocin drip, somebody wants to release your waters for you. Perhaps you want to make a plan for induction, a plan for an epidural, a plan for if you were to be offered a cesarean birth. How do you want that to look for you? And creating these plans, doing your research, having these conversations means that regardless of what your birth outcome is, whatever path your birth takes, you are still going to come out of that experience feeling empowered. And that's what I'm really about. I want you to feel prepared, supported, armed with the information to come out of your birth experience feeling really good. So if you want to learn more information, if you want to feel empowered and educated moving into your birth experience, make sure and check out the link in the description box down below.